December 28th, 2025, Saint-Tropez, France. The news broke this morning. Brigitte Bardot, the French icon who set the world on fire in the 1950s and 60s, died at her home in southern France. She was 91 years old. The Brigitte Bardot Foundation confirmed the death of its founder without specifying the cause. It is with immense sadness that the Brigitte Bardot Foundation announces the death of its founder and president, the statement read. For millions of people around the world, Brigitte Bardot wasn't just an actress, she was a revolution in herself. She embodied sexual freedom when the world was still stuck in the puritanism of the 1950s. She defied conventions, shattered taboos, caused scandals, made people dream. And then, at 39, at the peak of her fame, she walked away from it all to dedicate herself to another battle, animal rights. Now let me tell you the story of Brigitte Bardot, the Parisian bourgeois girl who became a global sex symbol, the woman who changed cinema forever, and the controversial activist who never stopped making headlines. This is the story of a woman who refused to be silenced. Part 1. The proper little girl from Paris, long before the scandals, long before the worldwide fame, long before she became Bibi. There was a shy little girl in Paris who dreamed of ballet. Brigitte Anne-Marie Bardot was born on September 28, 1934, into a bourgeois family in the 15th arrondissement of Paris. Her father, Louis Bardot, was a prosperous industrialist. Her mother, Anne-Marie, nicknamed Toti, was a strict cold woman obsessed with appearances. Brigitte's childhood was not happy. "My mother never loved me," she would later say. "I was an unwanted child. She made me feel it my whole life." Louis Bardot was an authoritarian father, almost tyrannical. He ruled the house with an iron discipline. Brigitte recounted that he would sometimes punish her with a horsewhip. "My childhood was difficult," she would confess in her memoirs. "I was a lonely, secretive little girl who took refuge in dance." Ballet became her escape. From the age of 7, Brigitte took classical dance lessons. She was talented, very talented. She dreamed of becoming a prima ballerina at the Paris Opera. "When I danced, I was free," she would say. "It was the only time I wasn't afraid." But at 13, everything changed. Hélène Lazareff, editor-in-chief of Elle magazine, was a family friend. She saw Brigitte at a dance recital and was struck by her unusual beauty. "This child has something special," she told Toti. "I want to photograph her for the cover of Elle." In May 1949, at 14 years old, Brigitte Bardot appeared on the cover of Elle. The photo showed a teenager with long blonde hair, an intense gaze, and a pouty expression. She was both innocent and disturbing. France discovered Brigitte Bardot, and someone else discovered her too, an ambitious 21-year-old director named Roger Vadim. And that's where it all began. Part 2. Vadim, the scandal, and the birth of an icon. Roger Vadim. Plemianikov was a dangerous man, handsome, charismatic, manipulative. He was 21 when he saw Brigitte's photo in Elle. She was 15. He vowed to meet her, seduce her, make her a star. He succeeded at all three. Vadim orchestrated a chance encounter with Brigitte in 1949. He introduced himself as an assistant director in cinema. He charmed her with stories of Hollywood glory. Brigitte, shy and naive, fell under his spell. Her parents were horrified. Vadim was too old, too bohemian, not respectable enough. But Brigitte was in love. At 16, she announced she wanted to marry Vadim. Her parents categorically refused. Brigitte then did something dramatic. She attempted suicide by turning on the gas in the family kitchen. She survived. But the message was clear. It's Vadim or death. Terrified, her parents gave in. On December 21st, 1952, Brigitte Bardot, 18, married Roger Vadim, 24, at the Church of Notre-Dame de Grâce in Passy. Vadim had gotten what he wanted. Now, He was going to transform Brigitte into what he'd always imagined, a sex bomb on screen. Between 1952 and 1956, Brigitte appeared in several French films, small roles. Nothing extraordinary. Critics found her pretty but talentless. But Vadim was working on something revolutionary. He was writing a screenplay specifically for Brigitte, a film that would shock the world and make her the most desired woman on the planet. The film was called And God Created Woman. Filming took place in Saint-Tropez in 1956. The story was simple. A free-spirited, sensual teenage orphan seduces three men in a small fishing village. But it wasn't the story that would cause the scandal. It was Brigitte. Vadim filmed her like no one had ever filmed a woman before. Naked, natural, wild. She dances barefoot on a table. She walks around in a bikini. She embodies an uninhibited, almost animal sexuality. When the film was released in November 1956, it was an explosion. In France, critics were scandalized. Obscene, vulgar, an affront to morality. The Catholic Church condemned the film. Several cities banned its screening. But the public rushed to the theaters. In the United States, And God Created Woman became the highest-grossing foreign film ever released at the time, earning $4 million, an absolute record. And Brigitte Bardot? Overnight, she became the most famous woman in the world. At 22, she was a global icon. But the price of this celebrity would be terrifying. Part 3, The Prison of Fame. Paris. Brigitte Bardot couldn't leave her house anymore. Crowds of paparazzi camped outside her apartment. Hysterical fans waited for hours just to catch a glimpse of her. Photographers stalked her day and night. I became a prisoner, she would say. I couldn't walk down the street anymore. I couldn't go to a restaurant. I was constantly watched, judged, harassed. The press hounded her private life. Every relationship, every rumor, every scandal. And there were many scandals. Her marriage to Vadim quickly fell apart. He was jealous of her success. She was tired of his control. They divorced in 1957. Brigitte then went through a series of tumultuous relationships. Jean-Louis Trintignant, her co-star in And God Created Woman, Gilbert Bécaud, the singer, Sacha Distel, the jazz musician. Each affair was splashed across the press. Tabloids called her a nymphomaniac, a homewrecker, a femme fatale. But Brigitte refused to apologize. I'm not hurting anyone, she declared. I love who I want. I live how I want. It's my life. In 1959, philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote an essay about Bardot for the American magazine Esquire, titled Brigitte Bardot and the Lolita Syndrome. De Beauvoir analyzed the world's fascination with Bardot. In the game of love, she is as much hunter as she is prey. She represents a new femininity, free, wild, dangerous. The essay caused a scandal, but established Bardot as a cultural phenomenon, not just an actress. Between 1956 and 1973, Brigitte made 47 films. Some were excellent. In Case of Adversity, 1958, with Jean Gabin, The Truth, 1960, by Henri-Georges Clouzot, Contempt, 1963, by Jean-Luc Godard. Others were mediocre, commercial films exploiting her sex symbol image. But regardless of the film quality, people came to see Brigitte. Her style became iconic. The tousled blonde hair, the cat eye liner, the casually sexy outfits, the Bardot neckline, those sweaters that slip off the shoulders, now bears her name in the fashion world. Millions of women copied her look. Designers fought to dress her. Dior, Balmain, Pierre Cardin, everyone wanted to dress Bibi. But behind the glamour, Brigitte was suffering. She hated celebrity. She was exhausted, depressed. In 1960, during the filming of The Truth, Brigitte made her first suicide attempt. She swallowed sleeping pills and cut her wrists. She was saved just in time. But the incident was hushed up by her production company. Filming continued. What I rejected most in my life as an actress was the spotlight, she would later write. That intense focus ate at me from the inside. The media scrutiny was relentless. Every outfit analyzed, every date photographed, every word dissected. They treated me like an object, Brigitte said in a 1962 interview. Not a human being, just something to look at, to desire, to consume. But she kept working. She was trapped in a system that demanded she maintain her image while denying her humanity. Her love life continued to be tabloid fodder. In 1966, she married Gunter Sachs, a German millionaire playboy. The wedding was extravagant. Sachs dropped rose petals from a helicopter onto her Saint-Tropez villa. But the fairy tale didn't last. The marriage would end in divorce after just 3 years. During this period, Brigitte also became a recording artist. Her collaborations with singer-songwriter Serge Gainsbourg produced some of the most iconic French pop songs of the era. She met Gainsbourg on the set of her 1959 film, Would You Dance With Me? Their creative chemistry was instant. Brigitte reportedly challenged Gainsbourg to write the most beautiful love song he could imagine for her. The result was Bonnie and Clyde and the infamous Je t'aime, moi non plus. They recorded both songs together in 1968. Je t'aime, moi non plus was scandalously explicit, featuring breathy vocals and orgasmic moans. It was banned by radio stations across Europe. At the time, Bardot was married to Gunter Sachs, who demanded the song not be released. Gainsbourg later re-recorded it with his lover, Jane Birkin, and it became a massive hit. But by the late 1960s, Brigitte was increasingly unhappy. The sexual liberation she'd helped pioneer felt hollow. The freedom she'd embodied on screen felt like a prison in real life. In 1969, she became pregnant, but suffered a miscarriage. It was a devastating moment. "I would have liked to be a mother," she confided. "But my life was too chaotic, too public. I couldn't have given a child what they needed." By the early 1970s, Brigitte Bardot was done with Hollywood, done with the cameras, done with being BB. In 1973, at 39 years old, Brigitte Bardot made a radical decision. She announced she was quitting cinema. Forever. The world was shocked. She was at the peak of her career. Why walk away now? Her answer was simple. "I gave my youth and beauty to men. I'm going to give my wisdom and experience to animals." And that's exactly what she did. Part 4. The Activist, A New Battle, Greenland Sea. Brigitte Bardot stands on the ice floe, surrounded by white baby seals. She's there to protest the seal hunt, a brutal practice where hunters club baby seals to death for their fur. Cameras from around the world are trained on her. "How can anyone kill these innocent creatures?" she cries, tears streaming down her face. "This is barbarism." The images circled the globe. Public opinion shifted. Governments began banning. Seal fur trade. Brigitte Bardot, the former sex symbol, had become the voice of the voiceless. After leaving cinema in 1973, Brigitte threw herself body and soul into animal welfare. She used her money, her celebrity, her influence to save abused animals around the world. In 1976, she created the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the protection of domestic and wild animals. The foundation fought against seal hunting, bullfighting, horse slaughter, for meat, animal testing, industrial farming conditions. Brigitte financed shelters. She adopted dozens of abandoned animals. She lived at La Madrague, her property near Saint-Tropez, surrounded by dogs, cats, donkeys, sheep. "Animals don't betray," she said. "They don't judge you. They don't exploit you. They love you unconditionally." In 1985, she received the Legion of Honor for her humanitarian work. Her foundation grew into one of the most powerful animal rights organizations in France. They lobbied for legislation, rescued thousands of animals, changed public perception about animal welfare. "Brigitte used her fame for good," said one foundation member. "She could have just enjoyed her retirement. Instead, She fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. But her activism wasn't without controversy. Brigitte's methods were sometimes extreme. She publicly confronted hunters. She called for boycotts of restaurants serving foie gras. She compared animal slaughter to the Holocaust, a statement that drew widespread condemnation. "I don't care if I offend people," she said. "Animals are suffering. That matters more than hurt feelings." Her dedication was absolute. She spent millions of her own money on animal welfare. She turned her Saint-Tropez estate into a sanctuary. Visitors to La Madrague described it as a peaceful paradise. Brigitte surrounded by the animals she'd saved, finally at peace. "The animals give me what humans never could," she told a journalist in 1988. "Pure love, no demands, no judgments, just acceptance." But her new life as an activist would take a dark turn in the 1990s, and the controversies that followed would taint her legacy forever. Part 5. The Dark Turn, Controversy and Condemnation. Starting in the 1990s, Brigitte Bardot began making increasingly inflammatory statements. She criticized immigration. She condemned halal ritual slaughter. She attacked what she called the Islamization of France. In 1996, she wrote a letter to then-President Jacques Chirac, complaining about Muslim immigration and ritual animal slaughter during Eid. The letter was published. The backlash was immediate. "Bardot has crossed a line," wrote one French newspaper, "from animal rights activist to racist provocateur." In 1997, several French towns removed statues of Marianne, the bare-breasted symbol of the French Republic that had been modeled after Bardot, after she voiced anti-immigrant sentiment. That same year, she received death threats after calling for a ban on horse meat sales. Between 1997 and 2008, Brigitte Bardot was convicted 6 times by French courts for inciting racial hatred. Each time she was fined. Each time she refused to back down. "I'm speaking the truth," she declared. "If the truth is disturbing, too bad." She maintained close ties with Jean-Marie Le Pen, founder of the far-right National Front Party, who had been convicted of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial in France. His daughter, Marine Le Pen, now runs the party. Bardot's association with Le Pen shocked many of her former admirers. How could the woman who represented freedom in the 1960s align herself with fascists in the 2000s? Asked one cultural critic. Her defenders argued she was simply outspoken, unfiltered, refusing to conform to political correctness. Her detractors said she'd become a bitter, racist old woman who'd betrayed everything she once stood for. The truth, as always, was more complicated. Brigitte had always been contradictory, revolutionary and reactionary, courageous and problematic. In 2004, she published a book titled A Scream in the Silence, where she detailed her views on immigration, Islam, and French identity. The book was condemned by anti-racism organizations. "Brigitte Bardot uses her platform to spread hate," said one activist. "It's inexcusable." In 2018, at the height of the Now's Me Too movement, Bardot shocked the world again by declaring that most actresses protesting sexual harassment were hypocritical and ridiculous. "They played the tease with producers to land roles," she said in an interview. "I was never a victim of sexual harassment. I found it charming to be told I was beautiful, or that I had a nice little ass." The backlash was swift and fierce. Feminists condemned her. Actresses called her out. The very movement she'd helped inspire in the 1960s now rejected her. Brigitte Bardot doesn't understand that what she experienced as charming was actually harassment, wrote one feminist author. She's conflating consent with coercion. But Bardot didn't care. She never had. "I'm from a different era," she explained. "Things were different in the 50s and 60s. I'm not going to apologize for living my life the way I did." By the 2010s, Brigitte had become a recluse at La Madrague. She rarely gave interviews. She avoided public appearances. She lived surrounded by her animals and her fourth husband, Bernard Dormal, whom she'd married in 1992. Dormal, a conservative businessman and former advisor to the National Front, shared many of Brigitte's political views. Together, they lived quietly in Saint-Tropez, far from the spotlight that had once consumed her. In October 2025, Brigitte was hospitalized for a serious illness. She underwent surgery that was successful and recovered at home, but her health was declining. And on December 28, 2025, at 91 years old, Brigitte Bardot died at her home, surrounded by her beloved animals. The icon was gone, but her legacy remained, complex, contradictory, and impossible to ignore. Part 6. The Legacy, the woman who changed everything. More than 50 years after she left cinema, Brigitte Bardot remains an icon. Her face is everywhere. Andy Warhol immortalized her in his screen prints. Fashion magazines still cite her as a reference. Young actresses study her films. But what does Brigitte Bardot really represent? For some, she's the pioneer of female sexual freedom, the woman who dared to claim her desire when the world wanted women to remain proper. Brigitte showed that a woman could be sexual without being a victim, explains a film historian. She took control of her own image. That was revolutionary. For others, she's a fashion icon. The Bardot neckline, the cat eyeliner, the tousled blonde hair. Her style influenced generations. In 2020, Vogue ranked her #1 among the most beautiful French actresses of all time. Her influence on cinema was undeniable. She helped usher in the French New Wave. She worked with legendary directors like Godard, Truffaut, and Mal. Bardot represented a new kind of screen presence, says film professor Claire Schub of Tufts University. She wasn't trying to be glamorous in the old Hollywood way. She was natural, sexual, dangerous. She changed what was possible for women on screen. But there's also the dark side, her racist statements, her controversial political positions, her contempt for the Me Too movement. You can't separate the Brigitte of the 60s from the Brigitte of the 2000s, says one critic. It's the same person, and it's complicated. Her animal rights work saved thousands of lives. The Brigitte Bardot Foundation continues to operate, rescuing animals and lobbying for animal welfare legislation. Shelters bear her name. Laws against animal cruelty were passed, thanks to her fight. But her inflammatory statements tarnished that image. Brigitte Bardot was a woman of contradictions, summarizes a French journalist. Revolutionary and reactionary. Courageous and problematic. Icon and pariah. In Saint-Tropez, where she lived for over 50 years, residents are divided. She put Saint-Tropez on the map, says a restaurant owner. Without BB, we'd just be a small fishing village. But she became bitter, adds a resident. The free woman of the 60s became a reclusive, angry old woman. It's sad. Celebrity reactions to her death were mixed. Some praised her contributions to cinema and animal rights. Others couldn't ignore her controversial statements. Brigitte Bardot was complicated, tweeted one French actress. We can acknowledge her impact on film while condemning her racist views. Both things can be true. The French government issued a statement. Brigitte Bardot was a cinematic legend who also dedicated herself to animal welfare. France mourns her passing. Noticeably absent from the statement, any mention of her political controversies. Brigitte's estate announced that, per her wishes, there would be no public funeral. She would be buried in a private ceremony near Saint-Tropez. Her animals, over 40 dogs and cats, would be cared for by the Brigitte Bardot Foundation. Her fortune, estimated at over $45 million, would go to the foundation to continue its work. That's what she would have wanted, said a foundation spokesperson. For the animals to be protected. Always. Part 7. The Final Reckoning. So who was the real Brigitte Bardot? Was she the revolutionary sex symbol who liberated women's sexuality? Or the reactionary racist who used her platform to spread hate? Was she the dedicated animal rights activist who saved thousands of lives? Or the bitter recluse who turned her back on the world? The answer is all of the above. Brigitte Bardot was never one thing. She was always contradictory, always defiant, always refusing to conform to what people expected. In the 1950s, when women were supposed to be demure and submissive, she was wild and sexual. In the 1970s, when Hollywood stars were supposed to chase fame, forever she walked away. In the 1990s, when political correctness demanded nuance, she spoke bluntly and offensively. She was consistent in only one thing, doing exactly what she wanted, regardless of consequences. "I've never asked for anyone's permission to live my life," she said in one of her final interviews. "I've never apologized for who I am, and I never will." That defiance was her greatest strength and her fatal flaw. It allowed her to break barriers in the 1960s, but it also isolated her in her later years. French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy wrote about Bardot in 2023. She represents the paradox of liberation, freedom without wisdom, power without responsibility. She showed us what we could be and what we shouldn't be. Perhaps that's the most honest assessment. Brigitte Bardot showed the world that women could be free, sexual, powerful. She proved that beauty could be a form of revolution. But she also showed that freedom without empathy can become selfishness. That speaking your mind without consideration can become cruelty. She was a warning as much as she was an inspiration. And maybe that's okay. Maybe icons don't need to be perfect. Maybe their contradictions are what make them human. Brigitte Bardot lived for 91 years. She was a ballerina, a model, an actress, a singer, an activist, a provocateur. She was adored and despised, celebrated and condemned, worshipped and vilified. She changed cinema. She changed fashion. She changed attitudes about sexuality and animal rights. And she never, ever apologized for any of it. Whether you loved her or hated her, you couldn't ignore her. And that, perhaps, was her greatest achievement. Epilogue. The goddess who fell to earth. Today, December 28th, 2025, the world says goodbye to Brigitte Bardot, the little girl from Paris who dreamed of ballet, the woman who set screens on fire, the icon who defined a generation, the activist who saved thousands of animals, the controversial figure who never stopped. Dividing opinion. In her home at La Madrague, surrounded by the animals she loved more than people, Brigitte Bardot took her last breath. No cameras, no crowds, no spotlight, just silence, peace, and the unconditional love of creatures who didn't judge her. Maybe that's how she would have wanted it. The woman who spent her youth under the world's gaze, spending her final moments in private, surrounded by innocence. Brigitte once said, "I was hunted like an animal. That's why I understand animals. That's why I fight for them." In the end, the animals gave her what humans never could: acceptance without conditions, love without demands, peace without judgment. Brigitte Bardot was imperfect, complicated, contradictory, human. She was beautiful and flawed, revolutionary and regressive, brave and bitter. She was everything, and she was unapologetic about all of it. And for that, for better and for worse, she will be remembered forever. Rest in peace, Bibi. You lived your life without asking permission, and for that you remain eternal.